My name is Rachelle Chapman, and I survived a spinal cord injury at my bachelorette party. The bachelorette party was planned by my two best friends. It was going to be at one of my best friend's houses in Virginia Beach, so she had a pool. I remember hugging my parents goodbye, and that would end up being the last time I hugged them standing, and they had obviously no idea, and I had no idea. And it was time to go out, and we go bar hopping to all the fun places in Virginia Beach, and at the end of the night, we had the limo take us back to my best friend's house. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning, and we decided to go for a swim. And I remember putting on my bathing suit and running downstairs. I was standing on the side of the pool, and just in a playful gesture, as I hesitated because the water was cold, one of my best friends came up and pushed me in the water, and it ended up throwing me forward, and I went headfirst in, and I ended up breaking my neck. All I know is that all movement and feeling completely stopped. After I was pushed and after all of the feeling and movement left my body, I actually remember absolutely everything. I was never out of it. I just knew I couldn't swim to the surface myself. And I think it turned out being the girl who pushed me, who got in the water, who noticed it first. I remember she was kind of holding me in the water, which is the right thing to do, to hold somebody's head and keep them in the water. But I wanted out. I was freezing. I was in shock. And I said, "Get me out of here." And so they pulled me to the edge of the pool. I remember, looking down at my legs because from my knee down, they were kind of in the water still. And I could see them, but I could not feel the water or the cold. Or one of the friends who were at the party didn't even live at the house, but she was very proactive, and she got the address by grabbing a piece of mail when she was in the kitchen. 911 was called quickly. They arrived quickly. I would say within 3.5 minutes. I don't think I was on the side of the pool any longer than that. And they have told me that when they first arrived, they see all these, young girls freaking out, and they were like, "Oh, this is probably not even a big deal. They're being dramatic." Eddie was the main EMT, and I still speak with him. He came through the gate and saw me by the side of the pool, and he knew instantly that this was not an overreaction by these girls and that this was something permanent. Him and another EMT were stabilizing me, putting me on the backboard. And I remember asking, have you ever seen anyone walk away from something like this or, walk again? And she said, in maybe my 30 years, one person. And I was like, okay. And then I said, "Can I still have kids?" And she said, "Yes." And so in that moment, it was like, oh my gosh, such a relief. One little thing that, hadn't been taken, at least in that moment. And so that was something that was keeping me going. I was rushed to the hospital in Virginia Beach, and the doctor was using this kind of like a needle prick to touch parts of your body. And the whole idea is can you feel this? Can you feel that? Is there going to be a reaction when they prick here or there? And I felt nothing. So he looked at me and my parents and said, "This is permanent. There's no chance of really any recovery." And I remember my dad, to this day, he said he was so angry about that because he said, "I just wanted 2%, 3%, something, give us something in that moment." And the doctor was like, "There's nothing." It was a very surreal moment. My husband found out about my accident pretty late in the day because he was actually camping with his dad. And I was like, "I don't know. I didn't ask for specifics. I don't know exactly what forest in the mountains they're in. I just know that they're fishing and camping. That's all I knew." And so it took a long time to get in touch with them because they didn't have any phone signal, so we could not just call them. A park ranger found them and says, "There's been an emergency. You guys need to go home." At the moment, my husband thought that it was his grandmother, who was very old and sick. And so he, was prepared for news like that. He thought it was her. And then when he got to cell service, they called his dad and told him what had happened. And the way my husband describes it is so chilling because he said, that his dad looked at him and said, "It's not good. Are you okay?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, you're not about to be okay. It's really, really bad." And he told Chris, and they had to make probably the most agonizing drive ever. I mean, imagine getting that news and then driving 5-6 hours or more. And so I know that was hard for him. And I did not see him until I came out of surgery. Coming out of surgery was actually pretty traumatizing, almost more traumatizing than the accident itself, because you wake up with, a tube down your throat. And I was on a ventilator. My arms were tied to the bed. They do that often because when you have a ventilator and you wake up, a lot of people go to pull it out of their throat and it's really dangerous. So to wake up to not being able to talk and ask questions, and like I said, my wrists are tied to the bed. It was very scary. The first time I saw my fiance, Chris, it's so hard to remember exactly what was said and exactly what he looked like. It's so hard to visualize. but I do remember holding hands. And I know I couldn't speak to him, but I know he was trying to speak to me. A lot of people ask, did you think that he would just freak out and leave? And did you think the relationship was over? And it's so hard to explain when you're not like in our lives, in our relationship, but it really never crossed my mind, because I was thinking, roles reversed. If Chris were in that hospital bed and he asked me like, you can leave, like you could end this all, I would be really mad at him, actually. I'd be like, why would you say that? We're going to be together. I mean, we just knew that the other needed the other, whether it was me hurt or him hurt, that, we weren't going to break up, especially, we were about to get married. We weren't like, it's not like we'd been together for a couple months. We had been together for 4.5 years and had kind of become a unit. One of us was not complete without the other. So I was in ICU for around 9 or 10 days. You would think it'd be longer, but that's all that I was in there for. And on the 4th day, they were taking me down to do some kind of surgery to help prevent blood clots. And it was the first time I was being moved to a different location. And for whatever reason, when they took my bed and rolled it into the elevator, I actually had full cardiac arrest. My heart stopped beating completely. I was told that a nurse jumped on my chest and gave me CPR. And that's literally the only reason I'm alive today. And sadly, that was like the first moment my mom was like, okay, I'm gonna leave and go home and take a shower. It had been 4 days. My mom was exhausted. And as soon as she was gone, she gets a call that this has happened. And my husband was crying. He knew that the doctor coming right back out was not a good thing. But as fast as he told them my heart had stopped, he was able to tell them that they got it going again. I can only imagine the fear and trauma of my family, especially my parents and Chris. But when I woke up, nobody had told me that I had almost died and that I had had CPR. I just woke up with this like horrible pain in my chest, like someone had punched me in the chest. I'm like, what is wrong? As a lifeguard, we were always told that if you're doing CPR correctly, you're breaking ribs, because the heart is, under all of that stuff. So luckily, thank God, my ribs weren't broken. I don't know how they were able to successfully do that without, breaking my ribs, because that would have been a way longer recovery. It would have been awful. But I do remember feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. And then I later found out why, obviously. When you have an accident like that is so devastating to every single aspect of your life, it's very hard to like compile all of that and like really understand what not only your future is going to be like, but like literally the next week is going to be like. My function, if I'm able to describe it, it's very kind of hard to explain, but I am completely paralyzed from the chest down. I have very little triceps and no finger movement. I do have wrist function. That's how I do a lot of things. That's how I pick things up. But I'm technically what you would consider a quadriplegic. So a quadriplegic is somebody who has impairment in 4 limbs, and I certainly qualify for that. So that's what happens when you have a cervical injury and break your neck. And so without finger function, imagine, how do you put pants on? How do you brush your teeth? How do you do your makeup? How do you take a shower, brush your hair? Literally every little thing was a victory if I learned to do it. I had really, really great nurses and a really good support system. And that's the only reason I think I was able to be super positive, but that doesn't mean that I didn't have horrible, sad moments. There was actually a moment where Chris broke down crying because he said, I wish I had danced with you more. It was something I always wanted him to do with me because I love dancing, and he hated it and he wasn't very good at it. And that like broke him because he didn't do that with me when we really had the chance. But obviously you don't know that these things are going to happen. And I was super reassuring in the moment, but there was little moments like that happened that were really emotional. After we got married, a lot of things slowed down and I felt kind of stuck, to be honest. I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I'm a recreation management major who can't move very well, and he's a teacher, and I just don't know what to do. And so I kind of had to pull myself out of a slump. I really did have one after, the media died down and the wedding wasn't there to plan anymore. And I was feeling left out of certain friends groups, and it was just a lot of kind of not great things going on for me. So I really needed to pull myself out, and I ended up doing a lot of things. I ended up actually writing a book called The Promise. After I wrote the book in 2013, I decided I really want to have kids. Like, it's time to do this. We go to the doctor and the doctor says, yes, you can, be pregnant, but these medicines that you're on would not be safe. And so we had to make the decision, are we going to take the risk of going off almost all of my medications and me being pregnant as a quadriplegic, which is high risk, possible, but high risk. Are we going to do that? Or if we aren't, what are we going to do? And with my low blood pressure, I just didn't feel like it was safe for me to do the pregnancy. We kind of put it out there. So I wrote a blog. That I wanted a surrogate, and that's kind of like how we wanted to do this thing. Out of absolutely nowhere, this girl, her name is Laurel. She was actually friends with Chris in college. I met her for like maybe 2 months as a freshman in college. She had seen that blog post, hadn't spoke to her in 10 years, but she private messaged me and said, my husband was actually a sperm donor for a couple, and it really inspired me to help a couple myself, and I would love to be a surrogate for you if that's what you want. And she offered to do it at no cost, which is the only thing that really made this possible, because what people don't realize, surrogacy and the cost of a surrogate can be up to $100,000. I mean, it's incredibly expensive, especially if you go through an agency. The surrogate themselves gets like $30,000 to $35,000. You're paying agency fees, you're paying lawyer fees for psychologists, for the whole process of making the embryo, and it adds up. Without her coming forward, and without the combination of having her and a nonprofit in California help us out, we still had to pay a bunch of money, but without those two things, it wouldn't have happened. This baby came about for so many people, you know, from the doctors that helped, from the surrogate, to all the people that donated, to obviously me and Chris, my family who helped out with us. Like, we wouldn't have that baby, who is now 7 years old. Her name is Kaylee, and she is the light of my life, and I wouldn't have her without all of that support. I want people to know that real love still exists, that good still exists with all this crazy stuff going on in the world. I want as many people to hear me so that they can kind of break some of those misconceptions and stereotypes that they may have had, and not on purpose. I mean, some people just don't know. And that's why it's super important for me to share my story. And maybe there's somebody out there who either has an injury now that could use the inspiration, or sadly somebody who in the future may have one, and they'll remember watching this. My name is Rachel, and thank you so much for listening to my story.